In our ongoing effort to educate the public about the steps that lead to the purchase of a home, we have a great guest today with me. Last show, we actually had a lender talk about the importance of a pre-approval letter. I have a guest today, Greg White of White and White Attorneys, and we're going to talk a little bit about the offer to purchase and the purchase and sales agreement, two separate legal documents, but very important in the real estate process and very important steps that you should take with legal guidance.
Yeah, the realtors will start the offer process typically with the buyers. One of the first and foremost things that I would say is buyers have already decided they're looking at houses, and I might get a phone call, John, on Thursday or Friday before the open house weekend, and they'll ask me, is there anything that we should know, Greg? And I will tell them, well, if you find the house that you think it's the right one, and your realtor's going to ask you're going to submit an offer. The offer in and of itself is a contract, and that's the first thing that everybody needs to understand. As a contract, it does anticipate a purchase and sale, but there are situations and times in recent case law where sellers have held buyers under the contract.
So I've heard that as kind of a new warning to people to be careful about everything they agree to in their offer.
Anything and everything that they sign can constitute a contract, a binding contract. What I will do is on that Thursday or Friday, I will ask the buyer, can you grab a piece of paper and a pen? And I'll simply say to them, write this down. One thing that you want in the offer, the realtor will generate most of it. But I suggest to the buyers, ask them to add, and they can do this. It's very simple. The offer is subject to a mutually agreeable purchase and sale. Now you put a condition in the offer that just says mutually agreeable. Doesn't sound unreasonable to me. Both parties need to get to a purchase and sale as a standalone contract. And the next thing to be aware of is once you've got to the purchase and sale, the offer is off the table. It's gone. So whatever conditions you had in the offer morph into the purchase and sale.
Yeah. In that warning, in that language, really protects people from cases that are out there happening every day to make the offer far more important than people had thought about years ago.
The offer, as I said, it has been found to be a binding contract. But when you add that condition, it's subject to a mutually agreeable purchase and sale. You've now got a condition. And if you don't get to P&S and somebody tries to hold you to that offer, well, you haven't met the condition.
Yeah, I have been advising people for years as they go forward to also have a legal consultation or a legal person in place as they go forward in the purchase of a home.
And what I ask for on the Monday after, now they went to the open house, the offer went in, and now let's just say it was accepted on the Monday after. Okay, Attorney White, what do we do? Send me anything and everything that was written. Typically, I'll just say, give me the realtor's name, and I'll email the realtor because they're going to have all the paperwork. But I want the offer, I want the financing contingency if it's in there, the inspection contingency. These are all pieces of the pie. To get to the binding purchase and sale, I don't want to miss anything. There may be something that was written into one of those pieces that's an extra special condition.
Yeah, clearly people can make mistakes, and we're trying to minimize their mistakes.
We're trying to minimize mistakes, and that's why I want all the paperwork. The offer in itself, obviously, is the first thing, but there may have been a chandelier. There may have been inclusion of curtains. There may have been including the workout equipment. And not typical in a purchase and sale. Doesn't mean it can't be put in. I had a client one time that added into the purchase and sale that the seller was, I'm sorry, the buyer was going to craft a highboy for the seller. The seller reduced the price. The seller knew the buyer. The buyer was a really highly skilled craftsman and couldn't come to agreement on price. Ultimately, they did. It included the building of a highboy.
Wow. So what is the typical time between a offer to purchase and a purchase and sales final agreement?
The realtor will, at that point, have already had it outlined in the offer, and I would say 10 days, 14 days. When the realtor is typically an agent of the seller, even if it's the realtor that's showing the house to the buyer, buyer's broker. But they're still ultimately held to a standard that they're paid by the seller. And it's in the seller's best interest to have everything shortened in time. The sooner they get from step 1 to step 2, offer to purchase and sale, within reason. But I would say typically 10 to 14 days. That time goes quickly.
Yes, because once they agree on the offer, it's pretty much pulled off the market.
It's taken off the market. It's marked as pending typically on
Right.
MLS,
Right.
so that the buyer can contact their lender. It's not a cash buy. They can contact their home inspector. In fact, I had one just 2 weeks ago where, because it was a cash offer, so there was no financing contingency, but we did want to have the home inspection. We wanted the home inspection for informational purposes only. That's not unusual, particularly when the market was really crazy. But I still recommended a home inspection.
There were people that were not doing home inspections.
There were
in that
people that
rush.
were foregoing the home inspection.
Right. So you had talked with me earlier about a step-by-step process for the buyer to be aware of, and the responsibility on their end, not to rely on everyone else, but to be aggressive and proactive in making sure they met those deadlines?
Active and proactive, John. And what I do, and this is really done partly for me, is once I get the offer and we've gone to purchase and sale, the next thing my office does, we do the important dates to remember letter. And yes, it's addressed to my client, the buyer, but it's also addressed to my controller in my office, because then it gets on my calendar. And if it's important enough to be on my calendar, I think it should be important enough to the buyer who's spending $300,000 or $400,000 that they should be given that information so they can put it on theirs as well.
Right. And there are steps that they have to be aware of.
And then, because if it's the deadline for their financing contingency, they don't want to wait until the 23rd hour and say, oh, I haven't gotten my letter yet. A week before, if they get my letter, then they can look at their calendars as be active and proactive, be in contact with, don't be bashful to pick up the phone and call. Call me, call your lender, call your realtor.
Because there are missteps in those processes when they don't follow the contract language on financing.
And if you misstep on a date, you don't have that contingency to protect you.
Right.
If you identify that you don't have the financing in place a couple days before, then you ask for an extension. And if they won't give you the extension, then you have time to get out of the contract to protect your deposit.
So go through those steps again, your advice to someone after the offer as part of this purchase and sale responsibility for
So in the
for buyer.
purchase and sale, to get to that purchase and sale, I'll go through the offer.
Yeah.
And I will look to see what's the timeline for the home inspection, if there is a home inspection. What's the timeline for the financing contingency? Hopefully they've gotten a pre-approval letter. They know what they qualify for. They know what they're paying for the house. And the loan amount is pretty much been calculated what they need. But they still want to be aware of the important dates and the timelines, because not so much now. It is quiet out there. But come the spring market, it'll pick back up. But over the last 2 years, it was crazy.
A lot of
A
competition.
lot of competition. And then you have deadlines, and the lenders have deadlines. They have disclosure deadlines. And the more active and proactive the buyer participating in the process, I like to say it's their $400,000. They're entitled to know what they're getting into.
So I think you've made a great point that as someone goes through this process, you not only need a good realtor, but you need to have an attorney that is advising you as to the steps that you need to follow to conclude it in a positive way.
And certainly that's my recommendation.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the legal bill fees during the purchase and sale are just going to go, could go problematic, but typically offer to purchase and sale, front end loaded for time. And then the week or two before the closing. As the buyer, we want to know that their numbers balance. They want to know what their numbers are.
Well, thank you very much. You've certainly done this before and learned as cases have developed different ways of approaching it.
Thank you, John.
So I want to thank my guest today, Greg White of White & White PC, for the great job he did in describing the importance of being aware all along the way of a purchase process, the legal ramifications of what you do. It is very important. There have been changes over the last number of years that have made those steps even more important to follow. And I thought the advice he gave was spot on.